I mean, one thing just to say about safety for a moment is that when we say, I feel safe or I don't feel safe, we're not going to be able to close our eyes and go into our immediate embodied experience and find safety or not safety. Safety and not safety are concepts. They're abstract. They're already a layer or two removed. They're dissociated from some embodied experience. It could be some racing in our heart, some butterflies in my stomach, some way that my throat is constricting, some flush in my face, some way that I feel like these impulses that I have to run, I have to fight, I have to get away, I have to curl up, I have to hide, I have to scream. And so with all of this experience, part of the alchemical part of the work is to go into the vessel where those concepts aren't there. We have to figure out for each of us what those words actually mean, what they're pointing to. When I say that I feel unsafe in this moment, again, unsafe isn't a feeling. It's an idea, it's a concept, it's language. So what is it that we're actually experiencing in that moment? What is that unique assembling of sensations in the body, emotions or feeling in the heart, sort of looping sort of beliefs and narratives about who I am and what the world is, and whether it's okay to show up as I am, whether it's okay to lead with my vulnerability, whether it's okay to assert a need or to enact a boundary or say no to someone or to disappoint someone. And so the kind of safety, and I can't really agree about safety. I think that's a really honest and important thing to say. And so in the meditation, when we're pointing toward a place of safety or to allow ourselves to touch into that part of us that was never unsafe, that's not unsafe, those are just meant as invitations, pointers into some aspect of our experience. I guess what I'm trying to say is that the way I'm using that term safety is it's not a feeling. Safety isn't a feeling. And so there may be feelings of unsafety that arise in a moment. But what I'm pointing to is a field that's so large, that it's so safe, that it's able to hold those temporary waves of unsafety. It's not, and I can see how it might sound like it's, the invitation is to pretend you're safe, because that's what the meditation instruction said to do. Let's definitely not do that. But it's more of an experiment, like despite the fact that I feel so shaky right now, so uncertain, so unclear about the future, so worried, rising up into the top of the window of tolerance, falling down into dissociation and collapse. That's not safe. So it's not a pretending that that's safe, but it's through practice, through inquiry, through grace, coming to investigate. It's just an experiment. If even in the midst of all of that passing experience, which arrive like waves, a wave in the belly, a wave in the throat, a wave in the nervous system, they have a wave-like quality to them. Because when we really meet them with that contact, with that space, they tend to not be what we think they are. I'm sure some of you read that book by Jill Bolte Taylor, right? My Stroke of Insight, was it called that? She's done a lot of research. There's been a lot of research about how long can a feeling state last if it's actually directly apprehended at an embodied level without adding on the sort of layers of the conditioning or what I've come to learn about. Because is there suffering inherent in a wave of sadness, in a wave of fear, in a wave of anger, in a wave of melancholy, in a wave of anxiety in the body? Is there suffering or struggle inherent in that? Or is the suffering and the struggle, does that arise from a resistance, from some subtle level of resistance to that? And all of the conclusions that we've come to about what that experience means about me as a person. Again, it's an experiment. Can we actually experience sadness all the way through? Can we experience what we would ordinarily describe as so incredibly unsafe? And while we're holding those, while we're containing those feelings and those sensations, those images, those memories, that implicit memory, that arousal, while that, is there an aspect of our experience? And this is the holding environment. This is the vessel that we're pointing to. Is it possible that despite feelings of unsafety, that there is a ground that's holding us in those moments? Again, this is not something to take my word for, but just an invitation into more of an experiment. What is true safety? Where does it lie? These are great questions. What do we mean by that? Because I think often just to say again what I said is we have to get underneath these concepts. We have all of these ideas: safety, depression, anxiety, generalized anxiety disorder. I mean, it goes on and on. We're not going, shame. Shame is a great one, because we're not going to close our eyes and go into that vessel, go into our body, go into our nervous system, go into our psyche. We're not going to go there and find shame. Shame it's abstract. It's a concept. We can't open our heart to shame. You can't, it's very difficult. I've tried, maybe you're better at it, but it's very difficult to open your heart to a concept. But if you ask Psyche, if you ask the soul, thank you, Pat, for that update. If you ask Psyche or you ask the soul to give you an image, if you ask to see that little one who's been carrying that shame for you for so long, and you see her on the side of the road in a ditch looking up at you, which was a dream that a client of mine had. And you look at her and you see that, either with your eyes, with your inner eye, you feel, you sense, you have some intuition that this one, or Psyche gives you the image of a wounded animal. That night there is a deer who's really hurt in your dream, who's on the ground, who's curled up, who looks up at you with those eyes. Now we're talking. That's the dynamism of Psyche. We can't open our hearts to shame, but we can open our hearts to that little infant on the side of the road, or that little deer who has a broken leg in the forest who's looking up at us, or however. It's endless, it's infinite the way Psyche will manifest itself as image. That's what Psyche does. That's what soul does. The language of soul is the language of image. And so these are really important questions about safety, because and it depends what lens we're looking through. From the perspective of trauma, relational trauma, developmental trauma, shock trauma, again, which is an overwhelm, unbearable feeling, unbearable somatic, psychic experience that is unable to find a home in which it can be held. And when something is overwhelming, it's unendurable, it's unbearable. What that means is it shuts down our capacity. It means we can't defend against it. That's what trauma is. It can't be defended against. We can't use our ordinary defenses, our adult, mature level defenses, like repression or just pretending I'm not angry, he's angry. We can't use our adult defenses with trauma. We have to rely on what are called more primitive or archaic defenses, splitting off, dissociation, where an entire other personality is created. And so from the perspective of trauma and from the perspective of unwinding, untangling those high levels of arousal that were unable to be discharged in the body and the nervous system, we all know about fight, flight, and freeze, right? So with a traumatic impact, there often isn't the opportunity to fight or to flee, meaning we just can't. It's literally not possible, or it would be more dangerous to do so. And what happens is all of that arousal in the body and the nervous system and psyche gets held in the brain, the nervous system, and the body, in our cell tissue, in our muscles, in our patterns of breathing, in the way we stand, in our posture, in our eyes, in the way we hold our heads up, in the way we walk, in the way we talk, the prosody in our voice. That gets filled with particles of trauma, of unresolved, undigested, unmetabolized trauma. And when we're talking about that, safety is everything. There is no healing from trauma without safety. Safety is the root and foundation of everything. So it depends what lens we're looking through. From the perspective of a more transpersonal, I'm sure I've said before that the spiritual path in and of itself, which is a process, an archetypal process of death and rebirth. Just thought I'd emphasize the death piece, but that's not safe. The spiritual path isn't safe. Meaning, there's no way, or we're going to inevitably be asked on the spiritual path to engage or entertain some sort of confrontation with the unknown, with the unconscious. Meaning we've spent our lives building up these schemas, these strategies, these ways of being to keep us out of our embodied vulnerability, out of too much anxiety, out of a survival level anxiety, out of these annihilatory states of panic. It was very, very intelligent to do that when we were 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And so that kind of transformation on that level is going to require that when those defenses begin to melt away a bit, it's not just bliss and beauty and peace and joy that's waiting there to greet us on the other side. That's part of it. But you might imagine what else is there, or who else is there. It's that little boy and that little girl that is still feeling that panic. And so that's going to come in. And so it's not going to feel safe to do certain parts of this work. And so I think what we're pointing to with these words of safety is there a type of safety that's beyond a feeling state, if that makes any sense? Meaning, not safety is a feeling, not I don't feel safe right now. Like that's 100% legitimate to be completely respected, honored, appreciated, validated all the way. And is there an opportunity to discover a level of safety that's so vast? And this is where we sort of leave the realm of the known and more, it's more of that transition into the unknown, into the mystery, into the friend, the ally, which is that we are being seen. And from that perspective, can I, through my own practice, through my own devotion, can I come to a place where that even the most painful, difficult, unsafe feelings and sensations, can they find a home? Doesn't mean I like them, doesn't mean I want them to be there, doesn't mean I don't want them to go away, but there's a certain friendliness, there's a certain capacity to contain that, because it's part of what I am. And I know that I don't want to split off from myself anymore. I don't want to create, I don't want to send those orphans of Psyche and Soma back into the shadow, back into the underground. And those moments are when we need our presence, our own presence more than anything.